Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with This Week in Cannabis News from May 23rd to the 29th. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learn something, please just leave a like on it, as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos, and then there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you feel ready if you wish to do so. But we're going to start with some great news last week, as it is now official. Cannabis is now legal in Rhode Island, with the governor signing a bill to end prohibition on Wednesday of last week, making Rhode Island the 19th state to officially end prohibition. And so slowly but surely, the dominoes are falling and more states are seeing the light, and that ending cannabis prohibition obviously has more pros than cons. And so good job, Rhode Island, and it will be nice to see the state soon benefit. We did get a big update out of Illinois, so thank you 2Js for sharing this one from chicagobusiness.com, as we did learn that a judge ends the legal delay in awarding pot shop licenses. So this is great news for the state of Illinois, as they can now move from having just 110 dispensaries to 395, finally awarding those extra 185. And while this is behind a paywall and I cannot read the whole thing, I did want to share these two snippets from 2J. So again, thank you for sharing these. As a Cook County judge has cleared the way for Illinois to issue an additional 185 licenses to open new cannabis dispensaries. Judge Michael Mullen agreed to lift a stay that was issued last year, and obviously safe passing will go a long way to help these small businesses and minority entrepreneurs. And it allows the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation to award licenses to the winners of 3 lotteries held last summer. Winners have 6 months to identify locations for their dispensaries, but can seek a 180-day extension. So at least good to see the ball continue to roll in Illinois. Well, we got this announcement from Abner, Kurtin, who I believe is the CEO of Ascend Wellness. And this is exactly what we wanted to hear, as apparently the pro-states' rights U.S. Supreme Court can help where Senator Schumer seems unable to. And defending the rights of state legal cannabis companies is obviously very important, especially as we move forward and the industry does not get the help that it needs. And so this is coming off of a tweet from Todd Harrison sharing word on the street that Abner, Kurtin, and so thank you, Abner, for taking this initiative and bringing the MSOs together to finally do this. Attach.org, so I'm not exactly the Cannabis Trade Association of Cannabis and Hemp, plus several leading U.S. cannabis MSOs, as they've retained David Boyes to represent them in 2 lawsuits, one challenging the constitutionality of the CSA for interstate cannabis, and one challenging the constitutionality of 280. And so thank you, Abner, Kurtin, for getting the other MSO leaders together and taking an initiative, because if the lawmakers won't do their job, take this to the states' rights Supreme Court, who hopefully will. And so wanted to share this snippet from Todd Harrison. So thank you for sharing this, because apparently Boyes has risen to national prominence for 3 major cases in the past. And so you can pause to read for more information about that. And while this is very early on, it's great news, and I will update you as this moves along, because hopefully the Supreme Court can deem this unconstitutional and it will force Congress's hand at some point going forward. Well, also just wanted to share this one from Max Mosner, because as time moves along, the reality is that the demand is still very, very strong in New Jersey, and there are still lineups around the corner. And the hype is real at the nearly 100 million run rate Curaleaf store in Belmar, and even realer inside the Verano Branchburg cultivation and production facility. Sorry, no photos there. But just a reminder, an impressive first take of New Jersey adult use market for leading MSOs. And this is just a reminder, the reason there are so many large lineups is because there are only 12 dispensaries open. And so since we've seen 5 recently approved, that is obviously going to help. But nonetheless, just highlighting that demand is very strong, and I wasn't even considering this being a long weekend in the US. So very happy to share this one from Christopher Norman, as NJ.com is way ahead of me, asking will there be enough legal cannabis to supply New Jersey this summer? Memorial Day weekend is going to be the first big test. And while I wasn't anticipating more than average sales this weekend, obviously we can anticipate more than average sales because there is a long weekend coming up. So love to be pleasantly surprised like that. And just so hopefully we will see the trend continue. More growth in New Jersey, more demand, more stores, more loosening of the regulations from the CRC, and hopefully that will allow the ball to get rolling for New Jersey. Well, I wanted to share this one from the Outlaw report. Essentially just shares what I've shared in my past videos, but reiterating that Blumenauer says that there is strong support growing in the Senate for cannabis banking reforms. And so I did just want to share this. I'm not going to go through the whole article, as I've covered this in past videos, but you can grab the link below just to reiterate that apparently there is strong support growing in the Senate to get safe pass. And that is obviously great news, but I share that first to counter this one from Pete Landrum, who is Brady Cobb's partner in crime, as they are lobbyists in DC, and they've been working on this. They've been working on this since 2014 from the early days. So just wanted to share Pete's tweet first. This one came May 26th. At Senate event last night, very reliable Republican member told me safe, unlikely in the USICA competes conference. And so obviously we don't like to see that, but again, this is still speculation and early on. This can change, but that is why it's it's good to prepare for the worst and expect to be pleasantly surprised and plan for your own situation. But just to add, Democratic Senate leadership told him SAFE plus expungement, auth, and funding will likely be added to Omnia Props bill. And so that's not USICA and competes, but that could potentially be a bill that gets passed later in the year. And so this could happen before the end of this year. Reliable info will stay on it. And what that does tell us, though, is that SAFE might not make it into the USICA and competes, which we know from the timeline that I shared in the last video could be by June 21st. And so at least that's less than a month away, and we'll know SAFE's fate. But if that doesn't happen, it's just traditional Schumer pulling it out like he did in the NDAA, and that's why you have to adapt and plan accordingly around that. But just to share what Brady says, eyes out on what my partner in crime has to say, but note the shift in tone from Dem leadership from no way on SAFE to choosing which vehicle. And the state-based expungement has Republican support, aka the Bipartisan HOPE Act, not a pump, merely his viewpoint. So again, just speculation at this point, but PS political theater at its finest. And I do agree, Brady. Thank you for all the education you've helped with along the way. So just wanted to share this article from Todd Harrison. How safe is SAFE? From a recent NewJersey.com article, and this one quotes Cory Booker saying that he supports cannabis banking legislation, but he adds it would be a shame if we don't do something to help people expunge records or some of the other things. And so this is a good shift in tone from him previously saying he would lay himself down to prevent cannabis banking from happening. And so with that, just wanted to share this snippet from the article as well. So thanks, Todd, for just highlighting this so I can share it to you. As for Booker, Menendez said he understands his position, but he said the need for legal cannabis businesses is too great to delay. And I do agree, and especially as we're seeing the legal issue in Illinois get lifted, and then we're seeing New Jersey come online and New York. It's just hard to think that SAFE's not going to pass by the end of this year, even if it doesn't end up passing and competes. And he adds, if we didn't have an industry that's already underway and making $25 billion last year, I could say we could wait, Menendez said. But we have an industry that's underway. It's becoming very vigorous in the amount of money that it is generating, especially for small businesses, minority entrepreneurs that even need to start in New Jersey, New York, and some of these other states that Booker and Schumer represent. We need to find a way to bank it. We should move ahead with safe banking while we still fight for the broader criminal justice issues. And so again, we don't know what is going to happen, but the good news is that support to keep SAFE in is building and heading in the right direction. So with that, I did want to share this one from Todd Harrison with Roth on U.S. cannabis as well. Apparently, deferred taxes, another low-cost cash opportunity. So you can pause to read. This is a little bit more information on how some of the cannabis companies are playing their situation based on the 280E tax. But so just to read the last line here, as long as companies effectively manage this liability, which is, I think, deferring some of their taxes and, waiting a little bit later to pay them, we believe it will allow for needed additional cash to help bridge these businesses to some form of banking legislation or uplisting, which should help reduce financing costs. And so again, obviously, the longer time goes on and the longer SAFE doesn't happen, I'd say it's just the more tier 2 or tier 3 MSOs, and especially the small businesses and the minority entrepreneurs who suffer the most because they cannot get cheap access to capital to, keep a healthy balance sheet and actually grow their businesses over time. And so with that, though, I did just want to share one of the more contrarian views to present. And so this is an article called Cash Crisis Loom at Cannabis MSO Companies, written by this interesting character on Twitter, James V. Baker. And so with that, I did just want to share this because it's good to share the opposing view as, what could happen, worst case scenarios, if SAFE doesn't pass and MSOs can't raise any money. But I would just add that all of these likely won't all happen at the same time because, this is an ongoing situation, continuously evolving. And so he summarizes, though, that the cost of credit is increasing and credit spreads are widening while sources of credit and equity are dwindling. And while that may be true, I'm sure some of these tier 1 MSOs would be able to raise money if they had to. Mind you, they did that last year so that they wouldn't have to do that now. While the cannabis industry is heavily dependent on external funding, cash is rapidly becoming scarce at MSOs due to negative free cash flow. But again, these companies are also growing in the right direction, and so hopefully the growth that they'll see from new markets will help offset that, while non-payment of income tax is a major source of funding for MSOs. Which builds off the last snippet we saw from Roth, highlighting that one way these companies can keep more cash on their balance sheet is by deferring taxes for a few quarters, but of course you don't want to risk doing that for too long and garnering unwanted attention from the feds or regulators. So keep in mind, this is a very bearish outlook, insinuating that nothing positive will happen for the cannabis industry from now until then, but I'd already consider New Jersey launching their adult use program a big victory for any companies in that state because it will add to the bottom line sales and revenues for those companies, as well as Illinois, for example, allowing that extra 185 licenses. We have not seen a lot of growth in Illinois because of that stalemate, but now that will be lifted, we will see more growth for the bottom line, the sales, and the revenue for the companies in there as well. And so with that, you can go through the introduction, just highlighting the main concern that the availability of credit has been reduced and the cost of credit has increased due to the Federal Reserve's moves to curb inflation. Has this affected cannabis companies in the past? No. And will it affect them going forward? Not likely. And so with that, though, he covers MSO cash flows, cash burn rates, MSO income tax owed, impact of mergers, and then conclusion, the clock is ticking. But the good move is that we are moving forward with the clock, or the good news is that we're moving forward with the clock. And so just to highlight, they cover the cash and cash equivalents on here, and then income taxes payable right now, cash and cash equivalents net of income taxes payable, and then they have cash coverage ratio in months if taxes are paid, and cash coverage ratio in months if taxes are not paid. And so I know this is probably blurry because even for me, it's not very clear. And so you might have to grab the link below, but just to run through, Ascend Wellness has 143 million in cash. Air Wellness has 78.6 million in cash. Columbia Care is 168 million. Cresco Labs is 179 million. Curaleaf has 242 million. Goodness Growth only has 8.6 million. Forefront Ventures has 8.6 million as well. Green Thumb has 174 million. Trulieve has 267 million. TerraSend is 88.4 million, and Verano has 139 million. So they have a lot of cash. I'm sure they'd be able to raise money, at least the tier 1 companies, but just recommend reading this if you have not, because it is good, informative, in order to help you play both sides and prepare best for whatever could come in the future. And so with that though, just wanted to share as more support is growing, this time coming from the Conference of State Bank Supervisors. And this one is shared by the American Bankers Association, as the CSBS News agrees that keeping the Safe Banking Act in the Competes Act will address public safety and regulatory clarity concerns when it comes to banking cannabis-related businesses. It's time for Congress to pass this bipartisan legislation. Someone ought to tell Chuck Schumer that. And so on to Verano, as they announced their first quarter 2022 financial results. So I'm not going to go through this. I recommend if you just want to get the main snippets, you can pause to read to learn more about their Q1 2022 US GAAP financial highlights, 2022 first quarter operational highlights, so you can pause to read for all that information, as well as their subsequent operating highlights from then until now. And so you can pause to read that. Mainly what I wanted to point out, and as a shareholder of Goodness Growth, and my shares will likely convert to Verano, main thing is they do not share quarter over quarter. They only highlight year over year, which I am more concerned about. And so we can see that their revenue grew from 120.8 million to 202 million. And obviously that's heading in the right direction. While quarter over quarter, that number did go down, and that happened to all the MSOs, but we know why. Croptober, weaker sales in January and February, a lot of factors into that. But main thing is that their cost of sales came in at 102.5 million this most recent quarter, compared to 66.6 million at the same time last year. And while their cost of goods sold has increased by about 40 million or less than that, it's good to see that their revenue has increased by about 80 million, a little bit more than that, helping them keep more gross profit and getting that up to 49.3% versus 44.9% at this time last year. And so with that, their selling general administrative costs did increase to 65.2 million, up from 33.5 million. And with all said and done, they did have a positive income from operations of 20 million compared to 18 million, which is an improvement from last year. However, it seems like they're paying taxes this time around, leaving them with a net income loss of 7 million compared to 2.1 versus this time last year. And so lastly, just to highlight though, unfortunately with Verano, they're not as healthy fundamentally over the next 12 months as some of the other MSOs. As we look at their cash and cash equivalents, they've got 139.6 million in cash on hand right now, while other current assets, which likely includes a lot of their inventory, is at about 200 million. And so with that, they got about 339 million cash and cash equivalents right now, as they can sell these current assets in order to get cash, but their total current liabilities for the next 12 months is 450.6 million. So that is more than their cash and cash equivalents and other current assets. While I do believe that they have cash that they can pull from that they raised last year, that is just one thing to look for. Plus, their intangible assets and goodwill is the highest out of all the MSOs from my understanding, mostly because they had to do a lot of M&A in order to compete and become, one of the bigger tier ones with the rest of them. But with that, that is about 1.6 billion in intangible assets and goodwill that might have to be written off if the investments that they made don't provide the sort of return that they were anticipating. And so with that, I still think the earnings were fairly good year over year, but a few other things on the balance sheet just to look out for Verano. And so with that, just wanted to share this snippet from Cannavestments, basically doing his analysis on Verano. And so with that, he adds, while Verano posts beats on consensus estimates, still a tougher Q1 that saw gross margin declines, operational expenses up, and operating cash flow near flat when adjusted for taxes. And so while a number of catalysts are ahead for Verano, which is of course New Jersey adult use, that will help add to the revenue, Connecticut adult use, Pennsylvania, Florida expansion, however, bloated liabilities will be something to keep an eye on. And so with that, you can read the write-up from Cannavestments, basically what he saw, as he does a deeper dive than I can do, as I'm not trained in finance, and he certainly is, if he's putting this information information out. And so just thank you, Cannavestments, for sharing this and sharing your 2 cents on the most recent Verano earnings. Well, lastly, also just wanted to add this one on while we're on Verano from Christopher Norman. So thank you, Chris, for sharing this. Is apparently confirmed with board secretary that Neptune Township's planning board last night, and this is as of May 26th, so this is really new, granted conditional use approval for expansion of Verano's Neptune dispensary to adult use. And so should be on New Jersey Cannabis Control Board's agenda for approval at the June 23rd meeting and possibly July 4th opening. And so with that, that is positive news that Verano could see another dispensary in New Jersey flip to adult use as well and potentially open in July, which will help drive sales for them. So with that, onto this one from Air Wellness. Says Air Wellness reports first quarter 2022 results. So you can pause to read just the main highlights here. And while I don't plan to spend too much time, I just wanted to use this as a prime example to compare how much more fundamentally solid and healthy these US MSOs are compared to some of the Canadian LPs. As you can pause to read the main highlights down here. And so more information here. You can pause to read the first quarter and recent highlights from Air Wellness if you wanted to. And then some M&A highlights and financial and capital structure. You can pause to read. And also just worth noting, I think this is the most impressive thing out of this report, as Air Wellness has been able to raise more money again at a very low interest rate, but it seems like they're doing that by taking out mortgage loans. And I don't necessarily know how that works, but I would just say good job to Air Wellness for getting a loan at a very cheap rate, which will help you have more cash on hand going forward if you need it. And I don't know if you can't use this for anything other than leasing or paying rent. I'm not exactly sure. But nonetheless, good on Air Wellness for being able to raise cheap capital. And with that, their revenue, let's compare Q1 2021 to Q1 2022. Good to see them increase their revenue from $58.4 million up to $111.2 million, which represents a 90.4% change year over year. So good job, Air Wellness, as they've been busy doing M&A, much like Verano, trying to expand their footprints while cheap in order to do so. While their adjusted gross profit, $34.2 million at this time last year, up now to $57.9 million, which is a 69.3% increase. And while quarter-over-quarter growth has been less than impressive for a majority of these MSOs, and we know why, delayed launches plus Croptober, which severely affects Q4 and Q1, I still think it's very impressive to highlight that many of these MSOs have seen steady or close to sales that they saw in Q4, just highlighting that the demand for legal cannabis is very strong. And so with that left over, in Q1 of 2021, they managed an operating loss of $8.4 million, but this is before they started to do a lot of M&A. And Q1 2022, we see that increased an operating loss of $21.1 million. But again, that is the cost of aggressively expanding and trying to become one of the bigger boys while you still can. So good job, Air Wellness. And with that, just wanted to highlight Air Wellness, $111.2 million in US dollars from one of the tier 2 smaller US operators. We contrast that with Canopy Growth Corporation as they report their fourth quarter and fiscal year 2022 financial results. And so just want to get to the nitty gritty and show you the numbers here as we look at their fourth quarter fiscal year 2022 financial summary versus the full fiscal year 2022. And the numbers make you want to and this is what it's been like looking at the Canadian LPs and their financial statements since 2018, because they've just never been able to get up to where they promised they could be. And so this comes in millions of Canadian dollars as well, not even in US dollars. As in Q4 full year 2021, Canopy brought in 111.8 million Canadian dollars, which means Air Wellness made more money than Canopy in this most recent quarter, which is down 25% from Q3. Their gross margin percentage, negative 142%, down 14.900 basis points. Adjusted gross margin percentage, negative 32, down 4.600 basis points, for a total net loss on this most recent quarter of $578.6 million. Adjusted EBITDA, negative $121.8 million, and negative free cash flow of $126.8 million. Let's look at the full year 2021 revenue in Canadian dollars, not even US dollars. $520.3 million Canadian dollars, down 5% year over year. Yikes. Gross margin percentage, negative 37 for negative 4.900 basis points. I don't necessarily know what this means, so can't translate that well for you, but down 11%, negative 2.800 basis points for full year net loss of $320.5 million, which seems to be an improvement of 81% compared to last year. Adjusted EBITDA for the full year of negative 415.4, 22% decline from last year, and free cash flow for the full year, negative 582.5 million, which is actually an improvement of 8% from last year. And so just to highlight that, that is the reality. So that's what Canopy did in this most recent quarter. And this is what Air Wellness did in this most recent quarter, but get this. Buy shares of Air Wellness at $7.90 Canadian, putting them at a market cap or total valuation of $456 million at the end of day close on Friday. And I'm not sure whether or not that's the fully diluted market cap. It's likely not, because it's from Google, and you likely want to check a more trusted resource that will accurately give you the fully outstanding market cap. But regardless, that means that you can invest in a company at a valuation of about $456 million that's bringing in its most recent quarter, $111 million in revenue, US dollars. And so keep in mind, if we extrapolate for Q2, Q3, Q4, Air Wellness is likely going to grow those numbers, and they're going to bring in likely more than $400 million in revenue this year, and they're trading for about $456 million in market cap right now. And with that, just want to compare that to Canopy, which means you can also get shares of Canopy at $6.15 Canadian, which puts them at a market cap or full valuation of $2.8 billion, and we just saw that Canopy cannot even make more revenue than Air Wellness in this most recent quarter. And so again, I don't know if that's the fully diluted market cap, most likely not, but just shows that the US MSOs, even the smaller tier 2 ones like Air Wellness, are being run better than Canopy, and that's what makes these US MSOs much safer fundamental investments over the long run versus the Canadian LPs. But again, the Canadian LPs have the benefit of being listed on major US exchanges, and that does benefit them, and that is most likely why many people will still invest in Canopy and other Canadian LPs, and that's why I still invest in Tilray, but most of my capital is elsewhere in the other MSOs. So just wanted to share that. And so with that, apparently this is from an interview with CEO of Canopy, David Klein. So thank you, Cannabis Investor, for sharing this. Is safe enough for triggering event? We don't know, but David did share something that we do like to see, as he says tactically a lot to do with what gets included in the incremental legislation, which safe harbors get included, and how agencies react. And if he wasn't using this word, we wouldn't be as optimistic, but he's using this word because this is what we want to see, and this is what investors want to see in order so that they can invest and know that they're not going to be targeted by feds or regulators, without changing the status of cannabis at the federal level. And so with that, pretty much exactly what BCOB law has been stating all along. And so we will just look out, because obviously Canopy is paying a lot of money in order to see cannabis legislation move sooner than later. And so with that though, just to summarize what I just went through, thanks Todd for sharing this, tail of the tape USD revenues comparing Trulieve and Canopy growth. So just the revenue in US dollars versus Canadian dollars, their EBITDA in US dollars versus negative Canadian dollars, and the outlook going forward. And so you can grab this link below if you wanted to look more into that, but just wanted to provide as much examples for you to be able to look through yourself and not have to go elsewhere and try to find other information and do that on your own. And so with that as well, just again, highlight, emphasis how well these companies are actually being run and why they are more fundamentally solid than Canadian LPs. If we look at the top 6 US cannabis multi-state operators, revenue over their operational expenses and the money that they're investing in their operations every single quarter. And so obviously the main thing we want to see is that the revenues are growing at a much faster rate than the operational expenses, but this covers Trulieve, Cresco, Verano, Curaleaf, Green Thumb, and Air Wellness. And so again, this one's from CC Visuals, so thank you CC for that. So onto this one from CC Visuals again, highlighting that Trulieve insider buys did take place this last week. And so for anyone that wanted to see some insiders and executives buying, well, Trulieve did not wait, as we see Kim Rivers taking the lead, buying about 156,000 worth of shares, Steve White buying 100,000 worth, Kyle Landrum buying 17,000, Raymond Powers 24,200, and Alexander D'Amico 21,580,000. So 21,500. So you can get a further breakdown of all of the insider buying from Trulieve. And so obviously this is a good sign that Trulieve investors do want to see. And so with that, we also do have this one from Cody Has Dad Jokes, as there is insider buying on Cresco Labs as well. Not as many insiders are buying, but we found him, boys, the only person buying Cresco stock at this time. So thank you, Dennis Martinolis, as he increased his cash position by 104,000, giving him a new balance of 24,200 shares. And so he added up. So good to see that. While we move on to MSOs, as Curaleaf introduces Endless Coast cannabis-infused seltzers in Massachusetts, as they launch Endless Coast cannabis-infused seltzers, a highly sociable line of low-calorie, low-sugar, and low-carb beverages, which will be available tomorrow, so as of May 27th, at Curaleaf dispensaries in Massachusetts. So good to see Curaleaf continue to expand their product line and get more products into more stores. And so if you want to learn more about these products, you can pause to read for more information about Curaleaf's new drinks, while Verano celebrates opening of largest Zen Leaf dispensary in Arizona with Memorial Day weekend festivities, promotions, and exclusive giveaways across all 6 Zen Leaf dispensaries statewide. And just a reminder that Arizona launched their adult use program in January of 2021. They set a record of like $1.4 billion in sales in their first year alone, and the growth continues as the demand is very strong for legal cannabis there. And so obviously, while Verano has 6 dispensaries there, I imagine that is going to be a growth driver for them going forward this year. And so you can pause to read for more information about what they're doing in Arizona this weekend. While Verano also announces the opening of Zen Leaf Westover, the company's 2nd West Virginia dispensary and 99th location nationwide. And so there's more information about this dispensary down here, but just wanted to highlight as well as apparently West Virginia's medical cannabis sales are projected to potentially reach 49 million by 2026, according to the MJ Biz Factbook 2022. And so while it is good that Verano and Trulieve, for example, are 2 of the MSOs that are trying to get into some of the less competitive states like West Virginia, and I imagine they're not getting in there for the medical market only, they're getting in there for when they eventually do legalize for adult use. It is just worth noting that that's why most of the MSOs are not trying to get into West Virginia, because if they're only going to reach 49 million in sales by 2026, not much of an opportunity. And that's why we can see it's interesting just over time to watch how different MSOs play, the nation at large, and how they make moves based on what they think will end up happening in the long run. And so with that, obviously good to see Verano expanding their footprint in some of these less competitive states. But again, it's going to be interesting whether this is a good decision or not so good one if, it takes West Virginia a long time to legalize for adult use, and if it takes until 2026 for them to even see 49 million in sales alone. And so with that, onto this one from the Office of Medical Cannabis Use. As we look at dispensary approvals for this past week from May 23rd to the 27th, and we can see that Move, operated by Verano, opened a new dispensary in Ocala, while Sanctuary Cannabis opened one in Green Acres. And I do not know the parent company behind Sanctuary Cannabis, unfortunately. But with that, good to see that Florida increased their qualified patient count to 724,588, which does represent less than what we've seen compared to weeks prior, but Florida adds about 1,266 patients. And so while that did slow down, not great to see, but obviously many reasons why that could happen. The good news is that dispensations from May 20th to 26th were very strong across the board as MSOs continue to sell a large number of milligrams in THC, large number of milligrams in CBD, and large number of ounces of smokable flower. And so we've got all the MSOs that do operate in Florida here, the number of dispensing locations, and all the rest of the information if you wanted to take a look week over week to see whether the MSOs that you own in Florida are increasing or decreasing their market share. And so with that, some other good news out of states as we have Georgia, the second state to officially put the question on the ballot for 2022 as Georgia voters approve cannabis legalization ballot question. We love to see that because Georgia wasn't even on the list in my past video. And apparently the measure was leading 80% to 20 Wednesday morning, with 95% of counties having reported votes, a total of 649,000 ballots counted so far. So it's great news for Georgia as they have recently just legalized for medical cannabis as well. And while their medical program has had some delays due to lawsuits and they've not been able to launch yet, I think the good news about this is that this seems to be for adult use cannabis. And I have no doubt that Georgia voters will vote an overwhelming yes. And from now until November, we'll just have to look out, but I will update you as I do believe more states will likely get the question on the ballot for their voters. And with that, good news is South Dakota cannabis legalization heads back to ballot in November 2022 election. And while this shouldn't have to be the case because in 2020, South Dakota voters already voted an overwhelming yes to legalize cannabis, but their governor actually decided that she knew better than every single citizen in South Dakota, which again, does not sound like democracy to me, but that was the case. And so for whatever reason, those living in South Dakota didn't get what they voted for, which is horseshit. But the good news is that South Dakota Secretary of State on Wednesday finished certifying petition signatures turned in earlier this month by South Dakota for better cannabis laws, according to the campaign committee. That's worked for more than 2 years to end the Mount Rushmore state's prohibition on cannabis. And so again, I have no doubt they're going to vote an overwhelming yes. And so hopefully, if they all vote yes again, like they did in 2022, the governor is going to let democracy, play out as it should, as opposed to thinking she knows better than everyone else. And so with that, just wanted to share that apparently Detroit in Michigan as well has finally given the green light for its first recreational cannabis grower to start operating. So that sounds like cultivation, but again, it's a step in the right direction as the city allowed medical cannabis for years, but was slow to adopt adult use. And lucrative rec businesses flourished in the suburbs and left Detroit behind. And so much like we're seeing other states in Florida, like for example, Miami, did not want to allow any dispensaries at first, thinking that it would possibly be a detriment, but obviously they're realizing that, damn, it actually increases property value and it's good for business. So we're seeing Miami start to accept dispensaries. Now we're seeing the main city in Michigan, Detroit, starting to see the light and realizing that, they'd be better off by allowing the cannabis businesses to thrive in their major cities as well. And so with that, just wanted to share from MJ Biz Daily, as Canadian cannabis sales rebound strongly in March to a record 358.8 million. Canadian sales of regulated recreational cannabis hit an all-time high of 358.8 million Canadian dollars, or $279.6 million US dollars, less than some of the Tier 1 MSOs are making per quarter in March, according to Stats Canada retail sales data released this Thursday, or past Thursday. That figure represents a rebound of 10.7% from February cannabis sales, although March had 3 more days in February. So it's at least good to see that rebound from a lower and a less than impressive February. And most notably, just to highlight that cannabis sales of nearly 145 million Canadian dollars mostly came from Ontario, which comprised 40.4% of the national monthly total in March, increasing by 10.9% over February. As that is where most of our population lives, about 14.5 million live in Ontario versus the rest of the entire country where we've got 37 or 38 million. And so obviously the main reason why Ontario is leading the way is because they started opening 120 stores a month as of January 2021, and that has allowed for the growth. Had they not done that, we would have seen a lot less growth. And so with that, it does break down the rest of the other provinces and some of the growth that they saw month over month as well. And so with that, last few stories, as Hedgie Vest Dude shares, congrats to the team at Advisor shares, the engine keeps on cranking. And so while I don't know enough about ETFs, especially leveraged ETFs, to make any comments on this, Just to share that AdvisorShares MSOS 2X daily ETF, MSOX, has been introduced. Apparently it's 2 times the daily total return of the AdvisorShares Pure US Cannabis ETF. And so from my understanding, that just means it's higher risk, higher reward. And so if MSOS has a negative day, you're going to get 2 times the losses. But if there's a positive day going forward, you're going to get 2 times the gains, I think. And so this is a newly single security ETF filed and listed. And so if you wanted to consider checking that one out, there's probably more information on the link below. But just wanted to share that as more vehicles to access and gain from this opportunity. Once the flip does switch, it's going to be beneficial for anyone who can take advantage. And so lastly, this study that I just found, I've not been able to go through it, so I didn't want to try and give too much detail, but I just want to recommend you grab the link below if you're interested. But this is very interesting, especially to all those prohibitionists who want to make sure you got breathalyzers for people driving with cannabis in their system, as apparently THC in blood and exhaled breath is not related to cannabis impairment, according to new research. So that certainly throws a curveball in how testing negatively affects cannabis users in legal states just because it stays in your system longer. But while it stays in your system longer, this study seems to highlight that it does not have anything to do with keeping you impaired any longer than any other substance. And so with that, I just found that very interesting and wanted to share that. As more data helps us shut up the prohibitionists who make decisions based on their feelings as opposed to what's actually true, while emphasizing the importance of descheduling cannabis from the Controlled Substances Act, because that act alone of descheduling it, making it legal as opposed to illegal, will solve so many domestic issues and allow us to study this medicine for what it is, help normalize the plant, and more importantly, give the plant back to the American people where it belongs, as opposed to in the hands of the government. And that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it, as it really helps out my channel. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I'll catch you on Wednesday for a midweek update. Have a great weekend, everybody.